The movie begins by showing how obsessed people are with their phones and online shopping, completely lost in the digital world. We then meet Lee, a young man using a second-hand goods website to sell his old laptop. As soon as he posts it, tons of people show interest. One of them is a woman named Yan, who asks to check the laptop in person before buying it. Lee agrees and sends her his address even though they have never met before. The story then shifts to Soo-hyun, a manager at an interior design company. She's upset because her team installed the wrong type of drain. It was supposed to be a triangle, but they made it an elongated shape. To make things worse, her boss Kim scolds her and asks why she wasn't there to oversee the installation. Hyun explains that she had just moved into a new house and took a day off to arrange her furniture. Kim decides to take the repair costs out of the workers' salaries, but Hyun disagrees. She offers to take the salary cut herself because she knows that cutting the workers' pay would make them less motivated. During this conversation, Kim calls her darling, which makes Hyun uncomfortable. It's clear Kim has feelings for her, but she's not okay with his behavior. At lunch, Hyun shares her frustration with her friend and co-worker Dalja, who can't stop teasing her about Kim's behavior. Hyun also explains how tough things have been for her. Her salary's been cut and her washing machine broke right after moving, leaving her with a big repair bill. Dalja suggests she check out a website where she recently bought a second-hand microwave in great condition. Hyun thinks it's a good idea to look for a used washing machine there. Just as Hyun is considering this, Kim calls her again, ordering her to fix more tiles at another site. Meanwhile, Lee, the young man from earlier, gets a message from the female buyer. She tells him that her brother will be coming to pick up the laptop. Shortly after, a mysterious man shows up at Lee's door claiming he's there for the laptop. Feeling uneasy, Lee grabs a baseball bat just in case the man turns out to be a thief. After inspecting the laptop, the man quickly pays for it and Lee feels relieved, but out of nowhere, the man pulls out a knife and stabs Lee multiple times in the stomach, killing him on the spot. Before leaving, the man answers a message on Lee's phone telling someone that Lee is headed out on a blind date. At the same time, Hyun is busy removing tiles at another site when she's startled by a swarm of cockroaches crawling out from underneath them. While she's dealing with the mess, Kim shows up unexpectedly with food. He offers to fix Hyun's broken washing machine, but she politely refuses. Kim insists though and starts tinkering with it. Thankfully, Dalja arrives just in time and says she will help Hyun instead. As expected, Kim fails miserably at fixing the washing machine and casually asks for a cup of coffee. Dalja, annoyed, doesn't hold back and firmly tells him to leave. Back at Lee's place, we learn that the mysterious man is actually a serial killer who picks his victims through the marketplace website. After killing the victims, he uploads their belongings onto the site to make money from their possessions. He pretends to be a buyer, gains their trust, and then kills them. Since the items are priced cheaply, they sell quickly, allowing the killer to continue his gruesome business. Meanwhile, Hyun unknowingly falls into the killer's trap. She browses the marketplace for a second-hand washing machine and comes across one being sold at a very low price by someone who claims they are moving abroad. Without giving it much thought, Hyun buys the washing machine and arranges for it to be delivered to her home. However, when the machine is installed, it turns out to be completely broken. It won't even turn on. Furious, Hyun tries to contact the seller, but he doesn't answer her calls. Feeling scammed, she tries to find the seller's ID, but to her shock, his profile disappears from the website altogether. The next day, Hyun heads to the police station to file a complaint, believing the seller is a scammer. At the station, Detective Na and Detective Ju brush off her case, saying it's a minor issue and that it could take up to 3 to 4 months to investigate. However, they assure Hyun that they will catch the scammer eventually. Detective Ju explains that they have already received over 100 reports of similar online fraud cases. Hyun tells Dalja about her experience and Dalja suggests she let it go. She shares that she was also scammed the previous year for 150,000 won and couldn't track down the culprit, so she eventually gave up on the case. Determined to resolve her washing machine issues, Hyun goes to an electronics store and buys a new one, even though she will have to pay in installments. The only catch is that the delivery won't happen for another 2 days. Frustrated, Hyun decides to go to a laundromat to wash her clothes. On her way home, the bag carrying her freshly cleaned clothes tears and they spill all over the ground. At this point, Hyun is very upset, cursing the scammer for causing all her frustration. When Hyun returns home, she tries to take a closer look at the profile of the man who sold her the washing machine and finds more listings from him. She finds the old laptop that once belonged to Lee, the man who was murdered earlier. This means the seller is the same serial killer who killed Lee. Unaware of the killer's identity, Hyun starts warning others in the comments, telling them not to send money to this man because he's a scammer. She even mentions that she's filed a report against him at the police station. The serial killer, now aware of Hyun's action, tries to intimidate her by threatening to ruin her life. But But Hyun doesn't back down and continues to speak out against him. It turns out that the killer has a sophisticated hacking system allowing him to dig up all of Hyun's online information. The next day, Hyun is late to work because she overslept. When she arrives, Kim, her boss, asks why she was late. She explains that she was busy last night trying to track down the scammer's ID. Kim, irritated, scolds her for being late over something so trivial and gives her a final warning. However, Hyun notices that his tone of voice sounds eerily similar to that of the scammer. When Hyun returns to her desk, she sees Kim selling something on the same online marketplace. This makes her suspect that he might be the culprit. Later that day, she starts receiving scam calls. Her phone rings non-stop and she gets a flood of messages from unknown people. They all claim they saw her post offering a free washing machine. Hyun starts to feel that something is very wrong with these strange calls and messages. The chaos continues as a serial killer using Hyun's stolen details posts her information on various websites to order unnecessary products. To make matters worse, that night several delivery men arrive at her door with items she never ordered. Hyun is now certain that the scammer knows her address. The next day, before heading to work, Hyun leaves a note on her door warning delivery people not to come by or else she'll involve the police. Frustrated and scared, she visits the police station again, demanding they speed up the investigation. The detectives reassure her that they're working on it. Detective Ju suggests she change her phone number while they continue their investigation. Later, Detective Ju visits the address where the washing machine was sold, but when he tries to enter, the landlady refuses, saying he needs a search warrant. When Hyun returns to her apartment, she notices that the note she left on the door is gone. She immediately calls Detective Ju and they review the CCTV footage, but it shows nothing unusual. Detective Ju tells her she's being overly paranoid, insisting that the disappearance of the note doesn't necessarily mean someone entered her apartment. Just then, a food delivery person shows up claiming to be delivering food for Hyun. At this point, Hyun is done with the whole situation. Detective Ju says he will check out nearby restaurants to investigate further. Feeling overwhelmed, Hyun decides it's time to change her phone number for some peace of mind, so she gets a new one. That night, Dalja visits her and they spend the evening chatting and sharing drinks. However, as Dalja leaves, it is revealed that the serial killer is already watching Hyun from a distance, lurking in the shadows. The next morning, as Hyun opens her door to leave, she nearly bumps into a mechanic installing a CCTV camera outside her apartment. The camera is oddly disguised to look like a sprinkler. Hyun finds this suspicious, but the mechanic explains that it's designed this way to respect the residents' privacy. He hands her his business card before leaving. Later that day while working, Hyun receives a message from the number of her mother. The message says that their air conditioner is broken and they need 1.1 million won to buy a new one. Hyun is about to send the money but hesitates when something feels off. She calls her mother's number but finds it busy. Suspicious, she texts her mother casually asking about her father. The reply shocks her. Her mother says her father is busy working, but Hyun knows her father passed away years ago. So she catches the scammer red-handed this time. Realizing she's been duped again, Hyun's worst fears are confirmed when the scammer contacts her directly, taunting her. He boasts that he's the one who called her mother's number and now he has full control over her online world. That night, Hyun hears a noise at her door. Nervously, she approaches and sees someone entering the password for her electric door lock. To her horror, it opens instantly. A man suddenly appears claiming he paid money to spend the night with her. Hyun realizes with dread that the scammer has hacked her door lock and is now sending strangers to her home under false pretenses. Panicked, she calls the police. The man, startled, flees before they arrive. Moments later, Hyun receives a chilling text from an unknown number. "Pay me 5 million won in 5 minutes or I'm coming to see you." Shaking, she sets a timer but hesitates, unsure if complying will stop the nightmare. The timer runs out and just as the buzzer rings, her door opens again. Another man steps into her apartment demanding to be let in. Hyun, paralyzed with fear, collapses into tears. Luckily, Detective Ju arrives in time to subdue and arrest the man. During questioning, it turns out the man wasn't the killer but had been lured by a fake message promising an intimate encounter. He explains he had been browsing the online marketplace when a woman sent him her address and door code, claiming she was looking for companionship. Later that night, the serial killer taunts Hyun with a final sinister warning. "Your death is near. I'm done playing with you." Terrified, Hyun contacts Detective Ju begging for immediate action. Though unsure how to proceed without solid evidence, Ju takes her with him to investigate. The trail leads them to Lee's apartment, the man who was killed earlier. When the landlady opens the door, they find the apartment eerily empty, stripped of its furniture. Suspicious, Ju notices a freezer in the corner. When he opens it, the grisly discovery leaves everyone stunned. Lee's lifeless body is inside. The forensic team arrives and the reality of the situation becomes clear. This is no petty scammer, the culprit is a dangerous serial killer and Hyun is still in his crosshairs. Hyun is visibly shaken by the discovery of Lee's body. The horrifying thought that she could meet the same fate looms large in her mind. Sensing her fear, Detective Ju instructs one of his colleagues to escort her safely home. Meanwhile, the forensic team uncovers evidence suggesting that the killer has been living in Lee's apartment for several days, methodically erasing all traces of his crimes. Detective Ju's curiosity about the case deepens, especially after learning that Lee's marketplace account has been highly active posthumously, used to sell his furniture. A chilling detail surfaces. The only call made from Lee's phone before his death is to order the freezer in which his body is later found. Ju begins piecing the puzzle together, suspecting that the person who killed Lee might also be terrorizing Hyun. His suspicions are further supported when Detective Na locates another witness who has been targeted in a similar way. Meanwhile, Hyun decides to move out of her apartment, desperate to escape the terror. However, her landlord demands a hefty fee for breaking the lease, which she can't afford. Left with no choice, she reluctantly returns to her apartment. As she approaches her door, she notices the odd camera above it and feels a creeping unease. Once inside, a strange smell lingers in the air. She tries to trace its source but finds nothing, leaving her even more on edge. Back at the station, the witness shares her harrowing experience with the detectives. A few months prior, she had purchased an item on the marketplace, but when it didn't arrive, she gave the seller a bad review. From that point on, she was terrorized. Dozens of delivery people showed up at her door daily, and her social media accounts were flooded with malicious messages. The harassment escalated until the perpetrator appeared at her home one night. Fortunately, she managed to escape, but the trauma had left her deeply shaken. Hyun's nerves are on edge when she feels someone has been inside her apartment again. Desperate, she calls Delja, who offers to let her stay at her place. However, Hyun refuses, knowing Delja's mother-in-law is visiting, and decides to stay home. With the police guarding her building, she thinks she'll be safe enough to try and get some rest. The next morning, she rushes out to work. By then, the police outside have also left. At the office, Hyun gets into an argument with a co-worker, and Delja has to step in to calm things down. She tells Hyun to go home and take a break, which Hyun reluctantly agrees to do. When she gets back to her apartment, she is shocked to see Kim, her boss, waiting by her door. He says he's worried about her after hearing from Delja and wants to check in. Hyun asks him to leave, but he refuses and even gets angry when she tries to shut the door. Kim tries to push his way in, and during the struggle, his hand gets caught in the door, injuring him. Furious, he curses at her before finally storming off. Hyun sighs in relief, but the nightmare isn't over. Inside her apartment, it's clear someone has been there. There are wet towels from a shower and food has been eaten. Then, her computer screen flickers to life and a chilling message appears. "You came early today." Terrified, Hyun calls the police again. When they check the CCTV footage, they see someone wearing a helmet entering her building. However, the memory card from her door camera has been removed, leaving no evidence of what happened next. That night, Hyun has a panic attack and has to be taken to the hospital by Detective Ju. While Hyun is at the hospital, Detective Ju's colleague finds out about 6 other victims with similar cases. The police hadn't taken them seriously because there wasn't enough evidence to follow up. It becomes clear that Hyun's tormentor is part of a larger pattern, a serial predator targeting people like her. When Hyun is going home from the hospital, she receives a call from what she thinks is Delja, but it's a scammer again. He demands 10 million won in cash, saying if she pays, everything will stop. He also tells her to turn off her phone that evening, leaving Hyun feeling more helpless than ever. In the evening, Detective Ju grows increasingly worried when he can't reach Hyun's phone, making it impossible to pinpoint her whereabouts. Meanwhile, at the station, his colleague manages to track the last call made from her phone. Unknown to Detective Ju, the scammer is closer than anyone thought. While investigating, Detective Ju is suddenly ambushed by the perpetrator. Before he can react, the scammer gags him and knocks him unconscious. Back at Hyun's apartment, the true horror unfolds. The killer has been watching her all along and is ready to make his move. As the perpetrator tries to break into Hyun's apartment, he is surprised to find Kim inside waiting for her. Without hesitation, the killer attacks, stabbing Kim multiple times until he lies lifeless on the floor. Shortly after, Hyun returns home unaware of the nightmare awaiting her. Exhausted, she prepares to sleep but notices something strange. Multiple CCTV cameras have been secretly installed in her apartment. Before she can process the discovery, she stumbles upon Kim's Kim's body in the corner of her home. Frozen in terror, she realizes the perpetrator is right behind her. It's the same man who had installed the CCTV earlier. Before Hyun can react, he strikes her, knocking her unconscious. Outside, Detective Ju's colleague arrives at the scene and finds Detective Ju regaining consciousness. They rush inside to find Hyun, but the perpetrator is already fleeing in a car. The colleague gives chase with Detective Ju despite his injuries falling close behind. The high-speed chase turns chaotic. Hyun, waking up in the backseat of the perpetrator's car, tries desperately to stop him, but the man slams the accelerator, causing her to be thrown to the backseat. Detective Nam manages to catch up and rams his car into the perpetrator's vehicle, but the killer refuses to stop, swerving and dodging every attempt to block him. In a final twist, both cars collide with a passing truck, bringing the chase to a catastrophic end. The car flips over in the crash. Detective Ju witnesses everything and rushes to help Detective Na, who is unconscious and not moving in one of the cars. Meanwhile, the perpetrator tries to escape from the other car. When Ju runs to check on Hyun in the other vehicle, he finds her injured but alive. There is no sign of the killer. He quickly calls an ambulance and both Hyun and Detective Na are taken to the hospital. Fortunately, Detective Na survives but ends up in a coma. Days later, Ju receives heartbreaking news. Na has passed away due to his injuries. Furious and determined to seek justice for his colleague, Ju continues the investigation. However, the case hits a major obstacle. The perpetrator's face doesn't appear on any CCTV footage and there is no solid evidence to track him. The homicide department decides to deprioritize the case due to other pressing investigations, leaving Ju frustrated and desperate. Ju approaches Hyun for help. She hesitates, still traumatized by everything she has gone through. However, while riding the train one day, Hyun overhears a passenger discussing an unbelievably cheap online deal from someone claiming to be leaving the country. It reminds her of how her ordeal had started. This gives her an idea. Hyun proposes a risky plan. She would create a fake account using Delja's identity and buy suspicious items online, hoping to lure out the killer. She believes she would recognize him if they met again. Ju agrees to the plan, promising to watch over her during the meetings. Over the next few days, Hyun purchases several items from sellers who seem shady, while Ju keeps a close eye on her from a distance. One afternoon, Hyun arranges to meet a seller claiming to be a woman. However, Ju gets stuck in traffic and can't arrive on time. Hyun assures him she will be fine as it seems like a straightforward meeting. To her shock, the woman turns out to be the killer in disguise. At first, the killer doesn't recognize her. Keeping her composure, Hyun pretends to examine the items and says she needs to inspect them carefully as she has been scammed before. The killer agrees and follows her to her apartment. Detective Ju, realizing the danger, rushes to her location. At the apartment, the killer waits outside while Hyun pretends to check the items inside. Ju calls Hyun to confirm that the killer is still there, but before Hyun can respond, the killer forces his way inside and smothers her until she loses consciousness. The perpetrator drags Hyun's unconscious body and then looks around the house searching for any signs of trouble. But when he returns, he is shocked to find that Hyun is not there. She has faked her fainting. She has been pretending the whole time. The killer, after finding her and having her in the corner enraged, pulls out a knife, but Hyun quickly reveals that everything has been recorded on CCTV. However, the perpetrator doesn't care. He's determined to kill her. Just as he's about to strike, Detective Ju bursts in and jumps on him. The killer immediately attacks him, stabbing him and relentlessly beating him while Ju is already badly injured. Hyun, desperate, manages to stop the killer by shooting him with a nail gun, but she runs out of nails. The killer then tries to kill Hyun by smacking her face multiple times, but Detective Ju, despite his injuries, lunges at the killer, tackling him through the window, and both fall from the top floor onto a car. The fall doesn't kill the killer and he tries to attack Ju again, but this time, Hyun steps in, grabbing the killer's hand while Detective Ju smothers him until life drains from his body. Hyun cries, sitting on the side as her nightmare is finally over and she now can live her life however she wants with no fear in mind. After all the chaos, Hyun is able to return to a normal life as an interior designer, free from the terror that had haunted her.